Do you think they're like laughing when they see college students in the West calling for global intifada and things like that?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is there's two main kinds of people. There's the Ghazans who are like my dad, who are really, really sad about what happened to their country or to their homeland. And they would feel nothing but anger to those kids chanting these things, because as they're chanting their BS rhyming slogans, it's the people in Gaza that are suffering. You know what I mean? These guys are going to go home to their iPhones and their Starbucks, but it's the people in Gaza that still have to suffer under Hamas.
Yeah.
So those people are really angry at the stupidity and how the stupidity is being spread like a virus, and how their voices are outnumbering and overpowering the voices of the people like my dad in Gaza. So that's very, very frustrating. And then there's the other group who are the Hamas supporters, who are probably who are the larger group, the ones who are looking at these guys, and of course they're laughing at them. I just saw a poster for strippers for Gaza. You know what I mean? You've got, they don't know anything. They don't know that they would be the first ones in line to be killed. But I'm just going to go back again to give you this little, history lesson of what happened in Iran when the Islamic regime was trying to take over. They linked hands with the socialists and the communists and everybody on the left the same way Hamas is doing it today.
Really?
Absolutely.
I had no idea.
Yeah. And do you want to know what happened after that? So they were like, yeah, guys, let's do this together. We'll be friends. Everything will be great. So they used them because they were useful idiots. But once they weren't useful anymore, they got rid of them.
Oh, my God. Reminds me a bit. Is there a similarity in Saddam Hussein I remember when he got in charge, and there was that famous horrible scene where he stands up and then he locks the doors and gets everyone one by one, like half the room, and just kills them all.
Absolutely. And that same story is just repeated all over the Muslim world. That's how they do things.
So scary. And that's the amazing thing, isn't it? Like, everyone grows up in the West, for example, with that cliche of history repeats itself. Mm-hmm. And we all know that. And for some reason, we're all sitting here just waiting for the Nazis to come back. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the one thing we're all just going, okay, well, got my eyes peeled.
Germany's okay.
Yeah, as long as Germany's all right. Then, nobody seems to be looking at the left at all. Mm-hmm. So people sometimes say to me, like, why aren't you looking at the right? And it's just like, well, that's obvious. You're all looking at the right.
Correct.
That's almost boring. And I agree when people say, like, the far right's very dangerous. Of course it is.
But you all know that.
Yeah, you don't need me to tell you that.
Yeah. And that's the frustration with coming from that area of the world, is all of this stuff is so obvious to me. I've seen it happen over and over again. And so when it happens in the West, it's like, oh, here they go again. These guys are professionals at it now. They've done it so many times. And when I say these guys, I'm talking about the Islamists. People are familiar with the Muslim Brotherhood. That's like the largest organization. But even they are not even that powerful anymore, because there's so many factions. There's so many little groups. They all have the exact same ideology and they're all following the exact same playbook. But when there's lots of little groups, then it's harder. It's kind of like that game with the cup, can you find the ball? And it's just like moving around. It's like, oh, these guys are humanitarians. And then you find out, oh no, the money is actually going to support jihadis. It's like, whoosh, okay, well now it's this group. You know what I mean? And it's this constant shift. And so they're harder to find. When it was Muslim Brotherhood and everybody knew them and everybody started to recognize them, it's like, oh, well, you've gotten too big now. So these groups are everywhere. And they are doing this. So they had a plan. It was called the 100-Year Plan. And they started that 100-year plan after the Ottoman Empire fell. So the Ottoman Empire fell in the 1920s. And at that point, they got together and they said, okay, guys, what are we going to do? How are we going to get back our caliphate? We can't do it the way we did it the first time around. We can't do it via the sword. We have to find a better way of doing it. And so that's when they came up with this Islamist strategy, which is through using different methods. One of them is, no surprise, the wombs of the Muslim mothers. So if you have 4 wives, each one of them is making a baby every year, very soon you will end up with a Muslim majority, or at least a significant minority enough of Muslims in that area to have political sway. And when I say that area, I'm talking about the West. So the question now is, how do we spread into Europe? How do we spread into the West? They're already in the Middle East and North Africa. They're worried about how are we going to spread the
scary.
ummah further. Yeah, it is terrifying. And it's very, very successful. It's been working like a charm. So they discovered this 100-year, the FBI discovered it. It was online. Everybody was talking about it for a while. And that's when it was connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's when they started to get too big. But these guys are still out there. Hamas are following this. ISIS are following this. Al-Qaeda are following this. Boko Haram are following this. Al-Shabaab are following this. Hezbollah is following this. Iran is following this. They've all got the same idea, which is we need to spread the word of Allah. But they're all some of them are doing it in different ways. Some of them are doing it violently, and some are doing it the way I'm describing, through using these different subversive methods. So one of them is through getting the Islamic vote. Another way is obviously through immigration towards the same end of having a significant Muslim minority or even a Muslim majority. And then a third way is using secular laws against itself. And that's one that people are starting to get familiar with.
That's infuriating.
That is so infuriating. And then free speech being one of those. We talked about the term Islamophobia. That's one way of doing that, right? So it's like, use this woke term. Well, it's not woke, but it's something that the wokes are going to be, feel connected to. Like, oh yeah, xenophobia, Islamophobia, racism, that's bad. Let's all jump on that bandwagon and attack anybody that criticizes this religion, right? They'll eat that up. And so what they're doing essentially is they're suppressing free expression. They're suppressing freedom of speech. And they'll do that. Oh, what do you have? You have a freedom of religion? Oh, okay. Well, my kids are only going to go to school half day on Friday. I need a mosque being built at this train station, or a prayer room, or blah, blah, blah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they'll use whatever inch they're given, and they will stretch it to make it a mile. So right now, what you've got going on here in the UK is you've got that teacher, Catherine
Birbalsingh.
That's right. Catherine Birbalsingh. And she's got an amazing school that's doing amazing work. It's winning all sorts of accolades.
Michaela School.
That's right. And what happened in that school was the kids took it upon themselves that they were going to start praying during the school day in groups. And when it started to become disruptive, the kids became violent. They were throwing things at the teachers. And so the administration stepped in. By things, I mean like bottles and chairs. Like it was pretty violent. So when the administration stepped in and they said, you know what, this is a secular space, a safe space for everybody. We've got Hindus, Christian, Jews, Muslims. Everybody is here, and we're all going to learn together, and we're all going to work together and support each other. And we're not going to have specific religious prayers going on because that's separating the kids.